We stand together to help you carry your pain. You're not alone. We will never leave your side.
An incredible patriotic moment. Despite being shot in the leg, Thomas Gunderson standing from his hospital bed to shake the president's hand.
This guy looks tough to me.
The motive for the deadliest mass shooting in the history of this country remains a mystery.
Paddock apparently tried to blow up aviation fuel tanks right near the site of the massacre, but it didn't blow.
There is evidence that Stephen Paddock wanted to survive or escape.
Face value. You got to make the assumption he had to have some help at some point.
They also found 50 pounds of tannerite. That's an explosive.
We received the very first statement from the shooter's girlfriend.
He never said anything to me.
Democrats are demanding Congress act on new gun control measures.
There is no reason to make a semi-automatic assault weapon into a fully automatic battlefield weapon.
We cannot be defined by the evil that threatens us or the violence that incites such terror. We're defined by our love, our caring, and our courage.
It is 3 o'clock in Las Vegas, and we start this hour from New York with a Fox News alert. The Las Vegas shooter may have been planning something even more sinister than his bloody massacre.
Police now want to know if he acted alone or had someone helping him plot the deadliest shooting in modern American history. And the theory is he did have help.
Adam Housley is live, still in Las Vegas with us with breaking details for us this morning. Adam?
Yeah, there are a couple of big details there you guys alluded to. First of all, the sheriff here last night kind of alluded at that press conference, in passing almost, that there may have been some help for the killer. But a bigger, I think, headline than that is the fact that we talked with multiple investigators last night, people that are very close to this case, and they said they still don't know. There are so many unanswered questions, and this was the key for us. They've ruled nothing out. Basically, they've been unable to cross anything off the list because there's so little information, at least the information that would help them identify what made this man become a madman. Now, that all comes as a report from the Las Vegas Review-Journal says, at least by their sources, that somebody, the man targeted, the fuel tanks, the jet fuel tanks, 1,100 feet from his room, directly across on the other side of the concert ground. That happens to be only about 30 or 40 yards to my right. We saw them actually inspect those tanks on Monday. Now, we talked with our sources here who've been obviously very close to this case. They don't believe that was the case. We don't know who the Review-Journal's source is. Those tanks were hit. It was at 1,100 feet distance, so pretty far away. But they were telling us that the killer sprayed the area he did not target, which would make it a little more difficult for him to actually go after those tanks. Whatever the case, there were some obviously hits on those tanks. But there were also people that were fleeing near those tanks. Meantime, this all comes as Mary Lou Danley had a very long interview yesterday in Los Angeles. We were told that she was very cooperative. However, that she didn't really have a lot of information to help with the case. They're still trying to find out more information about her companion's background. And her lawyer says she will do anything she can to help figure out the answers. Take a listen.
I am devastated by the deaths and injuries that have occurred. It never occurred to me in any way whatsoever that he was planning violence. While there, he wired me money, which he said was for me to buy a house for me and my family.
Again, it comes back to the whole thing, guys, of, I think really can be narrowed down to the fact that they have not been able to cross anything off the list. We're several days into this now. With other attacks we've seen in the last few years, they've been able to cross things off right away. This one is a bit more tedious for them. They have gained some information, and I have been told that the one brother who was talking that still spoke to the killer may have given a little bit different answers, and that the two estranged brothers have been very helpful as well, guys.
Couple of things, Adam, that pop out. Number one, there was a theory in the Las Vegas Journal-Review that he popped out the second window in order to get a cleaner shot at the tanks. As you turn around, does that make sense?
Well, you know what? Yes and no. I mean, at the same time, Brian, we showed the video from a viewer a couple of days ago on your show, on Fox and Friends, from the 1 year prior, a man who came to the same exact concert. And if you look out both those windows, both see the tanks. So that really doesn't make a lot of sense. There's no obscurity whatsoever.
All right. Adam, we thank you very much for joining us live and updating us on that. They did find 2 bullet holes in the tanks. And what's interesting is, and this was a detail in the New York Times this morning that I didn't realize, this guy was a licensed pilot. So not only did he work for the IRS, he worked in insurance, he worked for the post office, but he could fly planes. But
he owned 2 planes.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing about it is if he did indeed target, and as Adam said, he just kind of strafed it, that does not necessarily light up a jet fuel tank. There are mechanisms inside the tank. One expert out in Vegas said you have to be a very amateur terrorist to think anything like that. Like you could shoot it and blow it up. You know, like in the movies.
Listen to this story. There was a guy named Albert Garzon who told police he was staying in the room below on the 31st floor, room 135. And he said that he got a call from security, got a knock on his door twice. The first time was at 1:30 in the morning. And he said, "Sir, you need to turn down your music, your country music." He said, "Who complained?" And the security guard pointed up, "The guy above you."
Right.
So then he comes back.
This was the night before.
The night before. He turns down his music. The security guard comes back again and says, "Sir, the man's still complaining. Turn your music off." Turned his music off. He realized the next day when he saw the guy above, he looked out of his window and he saw the drapes flapping in the wind, that was the guy above him.
Right, and what was the concert? It was country music concert. A couple of things stand out. Number one is they had a dry run. That Daily Beast story, or one of the people that had the story was the Daily Beast of a dry run for the week before. He did it. That was confirmed yesterday in the press conference. Number two, there was a real sense among the sheriff that he had help unless he was a Superman to act alone. So he does not know who that help came from, but they were examining his background.
And then took it back, said Super Yahoo.
Right, and then this guy, Jesus Campos, who is the security guard, who had the courage and foresight to walk right to the door, take a bullet in the leg through the door, and then not leave the hallway. And when the minute he got there through the cameras, he took a shot, but that's when the Stephen Paddock stopped shooting, tried to escape, some have come up with an escape plan, didn't escape, obviously, and then killed himself. So therefore, it was a 9-minute barrage as opposed to maybe a 3 or 9-hour barrage.
That security guard, you know what he continued to do? He continued to go door to door to let people out of their rooms and tell them to run,
unarmed.
Right.
And there you've got one of the images from outside. It is extraordinary, though, the sheriff said yesterday he did have an escape plan. But he did not, the sheriff, offer up any details. But what was curious is, we saw those images of inside the room, and there was a note. And yesterday, the sheriff said, we found a note, but it was not a suicide note.
Not a suicide note.
Yeah.
It's interesting that they're saying that they believe he had a plan to escape, considering he knew they were going to come to his room because they were going to hear the ammo, the bullets firing off. But he had all those cameras set up in the hallway to see when police officers came.
He also blocked the stairway.
Right.
Oh, and had to take an elevator to get to him.
The sheriff did suggest that the escape plan had something to do with the explosives in his car.
Right.
So anyway, lots of details. Meanwhile, the President of the United States flew in on Air Force One to McCarran yesterday, and he gave one of the best speeches of his presidency so far. Look, we're looking to our leader to unite us in times of peril and heartache, and this certainly was one of them.
Here is President Trump.
The mass murder that took place on Sunday night fills America's heart with grief. America is truly a nation in mourning. We struggle for the words to explain to our children how such evil can exist, how there can be such cruelty and such suffering. But we cannot be defined by the evil that threatens us or the violence that incites such terror. Words cannot describe the bravery that the whole world witnessed on Sunday night. Americans defied death and hatred with love and with courage. We will all have to wrestle with the horror of what has unfolded this week, but we will struggle through it together, and we will overcome together as Americans.
And then he did some of his finest work, going door to door, spending 90 minutes in area hospitals and talking to others who saved people and others, survivors who lost people during that.
I know, yeah, and invited many of them to the White House. So
right.
They were heroes.
He spent 90 minutes at bedsides at the University Medical Center. He also met with 100 medical professionals. A young high school student, 18 years old, Tiffany Heiser, was one of the survivors. And afterwards, she was asked about the visit to her hospital room of the President of the United States and the First Lady. And this is what she had to say about the President.
Did he offer you words of comfort? Did he say anything that stands out to you?
He said he was amazing. Where was that?
Yeah, he was like super nice. He wasn't who we see on social media. He was much more comforting. What did he say that was so comforting? I don't know, like his tone and voice and just the way he was.
The way he was.
Not the guy that he appears to be on social media.
Right.
There you go.
Well, anyone who knows the president has a chance to meet him, and the reason why he got elected president is because he connects with people, one of which he absolutely connected with was Thomas Gunderson. Thomas Gunderson was shot, but he was not going to be kept in bed when he found out the president of the United States was coming to see him. This is his cell phone video that he relayed. He'll be joining us a little bit later today, but I thought his Facebook post was so telling and insightful.
Yeah, keep in mind, this is a guy who was shot in the leg, and he said, you know, I'm going to stand up for the president.
And this is exactly what he said.
Right. The Facebook post said, I will never lie down when the president of this great country comes to shake my hand. There may be plenty of issues in this country, but I will always respect my country, my president, and my flag. Shot in the leg or not, I will stand to show my president the respect he deserves. He will be joining us here on Fox & Friends in the 8 o'clock hour, 8:45 Eastern Time. After he did post that on, and there's his image right there, after he did post that on Facebook, apparently he got a lot of
backlash.
Some of the haters got in there, and he had a rejoinder to it and just said, look, it's the President of the United States. He comes in, I'm going to respect him.
Not only that, he posted on his Facebook page, I'm posting this. This is how I feel, and there's going to be backlash. I'm asking people on my Facebook page that like me, don't get involved in the backlash. Don't take it personal. Ignore it, because there are people out there that whatever the president does, or however you associate with the president, you're going to get backlash if you say anything positive about him.
Well, and there he is standing for the First Lady. He does say that he was able to stand yesterday and be alive to this day because of 2 female police officers who saved his life on Sunday night.
My favorite line from the president: when the worst of humanity strikes, the best of humanity responds.
There you go.
Right. The president insisted on being out there on Wednesday. The day before is in Puerto Rico. The series of events that's happened, if you factor in the national disaster, the hurricanes in Texas and as well as Florida, I don't remember any president having to deal with this much, this soon, this diverse.
And being there,
and
going.
Right. And, of course, he was asked by the correspondents who were there, what about gun control? And he said, today is not the day to talk about that.
But we will be talking about that in our town hall, which is going to be taking place each hour, every hour, and we'll debate, because it's already on Capitol Hill on both sides, them moving on that device that takes a semi-automatic and makes it automatic. We'll see where that goes.
Right.
Republicans are now saying maybe it's time to get rid of it.
All right, 13 minutes after the top of the hour. Coming up, should there be more surveillance on people who buy guns? A town hall, as Brian was saying, live in our studio straight ahead.
Plus, some Democrats, at least, and now at least one Republican in Congress, are pushing for new regulations regarding guns like that.
But the only manufacturer on the Hill says we are looking at mass shootings all wrong. Army vet and officer Steve Russell, turned congressman, joins us next.
There is no better way to honor the 59 people who were slaughtered than to take action to prevent this from happening yet again. If not, when will we ever do it?
Well, Democrats pushing for new gun control laws right after the Vegas attack. Now, one Republican Congressman, Carlos Carbello from Florida, is drafting legislation that would ban this bump stock, and that's the device that allows semi-automatics to become automatics, to put it simply. Here to discuss is the only firearms manufacturer in Congress, a true expert on the matter, and the man whose unit played a key role in taking down Saddam Hussein. He is Oklahoma Congressman Steve Russell. Congressman, are you okay with this movement on these devices to ban them, make them illegal?
Yeah, we can talk about going after implements and tools, but really we're approaching it all wrong. After 9/11, we were shocked and we said, who are these terrorists? Who are these people? How can they hurt us? How can we protect the public against them? And we've been largely successful for 16 years in that. Even though they've been in our country, they have access to our freedoms, our firearms, our free-flowing information on how to make things that could harm the public. And yet we've been successful. Why? Because we've identified the threat, and we've engaged the public. We're not doing that with these mass murderers. We're not identifying the threat. Here we have an individual who hauled hundreds of pounds of equipment in, who set up cameras, who went through elaborate detail, but he was not viewed as a threat. And so to get to a solution, you can't just go after the tools. Norway had massive gun laws. You had 70 children murdered on an island.
So you're saying, okay,
Paris,
let's just look, Congressman, let's just look at a couple of things. People said after Adam Lanza and said we got to look at mental health. Then we said we got to look at background checks. We would just, red flags would have been lit up. This guy had no mental health issues, and this guy's background checks were done, and he passed every single time.
Sure.
People looked at this. It's illegal, I guess, in most cases to have an automatic weapon, so they want to focus on that. What would you focus on right now? Or are you saying we should get a bipartisan select committee together with a timeline and a budget to analyze?
Well, one of the ideas that I'm promoting is to form a task force with experts where we could work on the issue with people that are actually qualified, that know the laws, that know the issues. I have combat experience. I'm a firearms manufacturer. I know 18th U.S. Code, all of these things. And we have others that we can quietly work together rather than be polarized, go to our corners and shout at each other. And look, as far as devices that mechanically manipulate to go to full auto and some of that, we have to have all of those discussions. But going after the implements is not the solution. We've been successful in combating terror. We can be successful against combating mass murder. And to that point, the 1934 Firearms Control Act, 68 and 86 revisions did not ban full auto firearms, but they did regulate them to protect the public from mass killings. And those laws have been wildly successful with virtually no crimes committed with those firearms.
We'll see if there's something for 2017 or not, but it shouldn't be emotional. It should be analytical, is what your point.
Has to be deliberate, absolutely.
Congressman Steve Russell, thanks so much for your expertise.
Thank you, Brian.
And you are indeed an expert. Meanwhile, the gunman's girlfriend claiming she had no idea of the carnage the shooter was planning, but is her denial a good defense? Do you buy it? Judge Andrew Napolitano is looking at that investigation straight ahead, and we've seen body cam video. What about the law enforcement identifying the threat in Vegas?
We are back on this Thursday morning with some quick headlines, starting with the Fox News alert. 3 American Green Berets dead and 2 more seriously hurt following an ambush attack in the African country of Niger. It's still not clear if all soldiers are accounted for. The Americans advising and assisting Nigerian forces when they came under attack by an unidentified terror group. This marks the first U.S. combat deaths since our military arrived in Niger to help fight al-Qaeda. And 17 people under arrest busted in a massive drug raid that used commercial airlines to shuttle cocaine and heroin across the country. Prosecutors here in New York say the group hid large amounts of drugs inside suitcases, flying them from Phoenix to New York City. 3 family members are accused of running the scheme. And finally, America's toughest sheriff is in the clear. A federal judge dismissing Joe Arpaio's criminal case and formally accepting President Trump's pardon. In July, the former Maricopa County sheriff was found guilty of defying a court order to end the profiling of immigrants during traffic stops in the state of Arizona. And that is some of the news.
All right, there's some of the brave trained to run towards the sound of gunfire.
So how exactly does a SWAT team stop a threat like the one we saw in Las Vegas?
We saw those images and we want to know. Pete Hegseth spent the day with Suffolk County Police and Emergency Services to find out, and he joins us live.
Yeah, it was a fascinating day. They were great people out in Suffolk County Emergency Services, the SWAT team specifically. They train on this stuff every day. They're the guys the police call when they need backup. And this Suffolk County Police Department SWAT team, also known as Emergency Services, as I said, trains year-round for active shooter situations like the one in Las Vegas. We got to look inside. I got to train with them. Take a look. Give us a sense into the tactics that you use, how you train for an active shooter scenario.
We need to get in as quickly as possible and effectively terminate the threat or stop the shooting. So the way we train the officers now in patrol is to, if you're the first person on the scene, you have to make that personal choice to make entry into that structure.
Hands up on the floor, on the floor, on the floor!
We're all watching from afar what happened in Las Vegas.
Hey, go that way, go that way, go that way.
just from what you've seen, your reaction to, those men that were clearing those floors and what they were facing.
From a law enforcement standpoint, to locate a sniper shooter type from 1,200 yards away is quite difficult.
Where is that coming from?
It's going to have to effectively rely on some 911 calls to try and localize where those shots are coming from. If you were standing in the crowd, it would be quite difficult. But the response to the hotel and the actual room where the shooting came from what I understand, was handled beautifully.
Breach. We have one suspect.
Every second is a casualty. So that's why it's imperative that the officers at the scene, they have to get there as quickly as possible and neutralize the threat.
Hey, they're shooting right at us, guys. Everybody stay down.
What kind of gear am I to be wearing today?
All right, we're going to put on you a ballistic vest. This is what we operate in, and obviously what we train in. We always train the way that we want to operate. So guys, no, train as you fight, exactly, because weight does make a difference, especially when you're working in it all day. So you want to get accustomed to wearing the gear.
And these plates, what do we got, 5.56 resistant?
They are rated for rifle rounds, yes, but I would not want to take a rifle round in the chest wearing anything, so plate or not.
It's been a while since I threw one.
Yeah, that's okay. So you just slip it up over your head.
Got to get it nice and snug. That's the key.
And then when we get rolling in a few minutes, you wear a ballistic helmet.
Oh, this feels like home right here. All right, guys, so we're about to roll up. Tell me what's going through your head right before you pull up on an objective or a house?
Main thing is watch each other's back.
Absolutely.
We all want to go home at the end of the day.
The psychology when you're at that door, when you're preparing to go into an active shooter environment, what's going through your head?
You have to be able to flip a switch. It's definitely an aggressive act. We control the structure by violence, speed, and surprise. I mean, that's really how the tactics are most effective.
Ainsley, you just said it. Your heart races in those moments. Without the training, you're not able to make the kind of decisions that have to be made at a moment's notice.
You've had the training. You said this feels like home.
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to the military side, except they have restraints that the military doesn't. We can toss grenades into a room, different rules of engagement for us. When in the civilian world, laws and children and families and uncertainty, you take a lot more risk going into a lot of those places.
These officers, evidently, when they saw the camera on the cart, said, we're waiting for SWAT to come in this case, because they said we don't have any idea what we're walking into, and then SWAT ends up blowing up.
Because it was an active shooter situation that once the shots were done being fired, turned into a more deliberate approach, which this SWAT team talked about. If shots are fired, they're going in no matter what. If it's more of a hostage situation, then they can take the time to stack on the door and go in.
Once the shots were stopped, when they didn't hear them being fired anymore, they started getting people off that hotel floor. Once everyone was out, then they went into the shooter's room and found him dead.
That's right. Huge thanks to the Suffolk County police officers. That's on Long Island in New York. A fantastic force.
Yeah, think the Hamptons right around there.
Yep.
All right, Pete, thank you very much for going out there.
All right, coming up, nearly 60 people murdered at the Mandalay Bay Hotel, or right outside of it at least, and now hotels across the country are taking new measures to protect their guests. We are live on the ground with what they're doing and how tourists now are reacting.
Plus, in the wake of the tragedy, America debates, do we need more gun laws, or does the political left just want to take away your guns? A town hall live from our studio straight ahead on this Thursday.
Back with a Fox News alert. The Las Vegas shooter might have had help carrying out the deadliest mass shooting in modern American history.
Police also believe that Stephen Paddock had a plan to escape. Yeah, he wanted to survive, perhaps, after gunning down innocent country music fans at the Las Vegas Strip. And bullet holes in nearby jet fuel tanks could suggest that Paddock wanted to cause an explosion and incinerate people, killing even more.
Now his girlfriend is back on American soil, telling investigators she had no idea about the attack.
Do you buy it? Let's go down to Steve with the town hall.
All right, Brian and Ainsley, thank you. The massacre in Vegas is renewing the debate about gun control all across the country. Let's bring in our town hall panel to weigh in on this. Good morning, everybody. One of the things we discovered as they have gone through the room is apparently he was not firing with an automatic weapon. As it turns out, he had semi-automatic weapons he had bought something online or through a retailer called a bump stock. Can I see the hands? Who has ever heard of a bump stock before this week? Okay, so it is kind of, apparently, and I was reading about it, it's something that was passed a while back, was okayed because it allowed people with disabilities to then do recreational shooting. Who thinks it's time to have the debate in this country about changing laws regarding things like bump stocks? All right, let's start with you, Tiffany. Why?
You know, this has personally affected me, Steve, where my sister-in-law was at that concert. And so
Your sister-in-law was?
My sister-in-law was at that concert, and we had to wait, just like so many other families, wondering whether she was dead or alive. And thank God she turned out to be safe and got to safety as bullets were flying all around her. But it is unconscionable that a private citizen can amass this type of arsenal legally. There comes a time when what is legal...
Do you have a problem with the number of guns?
Yes, I have a problem with the number of guns, that it did not set off any red flags, and that that he did so all legally.
Okay.
And there comes a time, Steve, when what is legal is no longer moral.
All right, Tammy, let's go to you in the back row. There's an item in the New York Times today that says some Republican senators and, in fact, congressmen as well are open to talking about these particular bum stocks. Maybe it's time to get rid of them.
We would expect that. And look, it's been an extraordinary week for all of us. America is, it's been difficult. And yet this is the conversation that has to be had in some fashion. There is an automatic reaction to dealing with the issue of guns or an element like a bump stock. It's clear, we understand why this is awful. Right. At the same time, there's also a story this week out of Las Vegas Journal-Review about a mind-altering drug that the shooter, the maniac, was just prescribed in June.
Just got Valium.
An anti-anxiety drug. It's of a class now that we recognize, of course, like with alcohol or other drugs, can impact the issue of aggression and violence. What the problem we have that discussion about firearms, it's the presumption that it's the solution, when in fact we're never dealing with the human condition and the nature of the person who is pulling that trigger, and that's got to be. We've got to enter into that conversation.
Rachel, let's go to you right there, right now. You also say we got to talk about mental health. You know, guns are one thing, but let's talk about mental health as well.
That's right. Now, it may not relate to this particular case, but after Newtown, there were lots of parents that came forward and said, hey, I have a kid who is mentally unstable. I'm actually afraid to be in the home with this kid. I think he's going to kill me or himself or others. And they couldn't take their kids to a place. There were not the laws or the resources available to help them. I mean, that's a serious problem. And I know that they've been trying to deal with that in the U.S. House of Representatives and the Congress. But I think that Tammy's right. A lot of times, these kind of solutions, there's no room for it because gun control and that whole conversation takes all the airspace.
Front row right here. Professor, what do you make of all this?
You know, I think that there's a middle ground here. I think we do need to have a discussion, but I think part of the discussion we never have involves the tech industry. We have a tech industry that can take this out of the legal realm and help us solve some of these problems via technology. So I would put up, we've had growing areas in terms of smart guns that are able to cut down. The problem is, after something like this, a smart gun wouldn't have stopped this shooter. And to Tammy's point, there are mental health issues, but you can use technology to cut down. I mean, you look at the number of shootings we've had and the killings and the people who've been wounded in gun violence. We can cut that number back through things like the use of technology, and that's a challenge the government should fund and put to the technology community. Help us solve this problem.
Okay. Well, yesterday when he was on the ground in Las Vegas, the President of the United States was asked about, is now the time to have the dialogue about gun control? And the President said no. However, Hillary Clinton, in a podcast, was talking about it and says Republicans are complicit in what happened in Vegas.
It is a sign of the deep dysfunction of this government and this Republican Party that has been taken over by extreme elements to the point that they are doing whatever they're told to do.
Do you feel like they're complicit, the GOP, the NRA, in the gun epidemic we're seeing in America?
Of course they are. Of course they are.
Janine Borelli?
Yeah, Steve, I think Hillary Clinton's comments, early on, she came out immediately after this happened, tweeting and criticizing the NRA. I find her comments outrageous and disgusting. She wasn't even talking about the individuals, the victims who were harmed, who were killed. And listen, I don't recall her running on gun control when she was running for office. And not only that, under former President Obama, where was the outrage for gun control then? They could have moved in and done something.
Do you see this as an opportunity by some on the political left to grab guns?
Absolutely. It's a total gun grab. And listen, my heart, my thoughts and prayers with all of the victims, anyone that is affected by this, your family as well. But listen, I see this as any time that something like this happens, that the left comes out and tries to push their gun grab agenda, and it's the wrong agenda.
All right. Rebecca Grant?
Well, President Trump is right. This is a week to mourn and to reflect, and we all need to keep that in mind. Going forward, you know, personally, I cannot understand why he had those guns. I have no use for some of that stuff. But it's going to take.
Do you have a problem with the number of guns he had?
Oh, sure, I do. Doesn't everyone have a problem with that? But we can't look to that as the only answer. If it's not guns, maybe it'll be drones in the future.
All right.
We see France with strict laws, and it hasn't helped them.
Kelly McCann, welcome back. We haven't seen you in a while. Marine vet, what is your perspective on this?
I think that there's always buzzwords surrounding this whole issue. You know, I mean, if it wasn't bump stocks, it'd be bipods. If it wasn't bipods, it'd be bayonet lugs. If it wasn't bayonet lugs, it'd be flash hiders. This is an emotional issue, right? And there's something that has got to be done, obviously, but it's seminal to our rights. And if we tinker with Second Amendment rights, and I'm not shilling for anybody or anything, but if we start tinkering with rights, where does it stop? I mean, our First Amendment rights just caused some deaths not too long ago.
Sure.
Do we tinker with that one? And who tinkers? And why should they get to do it?
Right. Dr. Porcher, we're going to end with you right now. You look at the number of gun laws in the country, and then you look at what's happening, for instance, in Chicago. They've got some of the most restrictive gun laws in the country, and yet it doesn't seem to be making a dent in the killing that's going on out there.
Absolutely. There's been no empirical data that's supported a precipitous drop in crime in relation to gun control. When we look at countries like England and Germany, for that matter, they've tried it and it hasn't worked. Let's take in consideration the knife-wielding suspect on a London bridge.
Right.
Had there been a gun owner, a licensed gun owner on that bridge, that attack would have been thwarted. When we look at what happened in Tennessee just 2 weeks ago, there was a licensed gun owner that was able to counter and neutralize that suspect in that church.
Before we go, can I see the hands? Does anybody know of one gun law they could write that would have prevented what happened on Sunday night? Okay, we're going to end it right there then. All right, our thanks to the Town Hall panel. They will be back with us at 8:30 Eastern Time. Thank you very much. All right, 18 minutes before the top of the hour, his wife of 32 years died in his arms during the shooting rampage. Now he's opening up about her last moments on this earth. The heartbreaking story, top of the hour. Plus, the gunman's girlfriend says she had no idea what he was about to do. Is denial a good defense? Judge Andrew Napolitano joins us next.
We are back now with extreme weather to tell you about and a possible hurricane, another one brewing in the Caribbean.
Meteorologist Janice Dean is live with the latest on Nate. And Janice, is Nate headed for the Gulf?
Yes, the answer is yes. It is not Nate just yet. It is still a tropical depression. And the longer it spends close to land, it's not going to get its act together. And that's what we're hoping for. However, the National Hurricane Center says that, yes, this is going to become Nate, a tropical storm as it moves into the Gulf of Mexico this weekend, possibly becoming a minimal hurricane and potentially making landfall anywhere from Louisiana to the Florida Panhandle. So my advice is we don't have a lot of time. If you live anywhere from Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama into Florida, you need to be making your preparations. This is going to happen this weekend. And again, potentially a hurricane. Don't think it's going to be a major hurricane, but something we have to potentially watch because hurricane season is not over yet.
Until the end of November. All right,
Yep.
JD, thank you.
Thanks. Of course.
All right, a Fox News alert. The girlfriend of the Las Vegas shooter back now in the United States and facing questions from investigators. Mary Lou Danley's attorney addressing the media with her statement saying she had no idea about the shooting.
All right, the big question is denial a good defense? Here to weigh in, Judge Andrew Napolitano. Judge,
good morning, guys.
It said, there's a chance that her denial could be as well rehearsed as his attack.
Yes, there is a chance, and it is. I share a little bit of Sheriff Lombardo's view that there was so much planning in this and it went on for so long. Pardon me. It's hard to believe that nobody knew about it. However, she does seem to be cooperating to an extraordinary extent. I mean, she came back voluntarily. Her lawyer basically told the government ahead of time what she was going to say. They interviewed her, the best interrogators the FBI has, and she did say what he said they would say. We don't have their evaluation yet, but she's not arrested, so they must find some credibility in her denials. But again, we're calling them denials. She's not accused of anything. She's just asked.
Person of interest.
Correct. Well, that's an interesting phrase, but which I'll talk about in a second. She's just asked to fill in pieces of the puzzle, and whatever she told them was consistent with what they expected to hear.
Right. What about her alibi? The fact that she didn't even know she was going to the Philippines, according to her attorney, until he said, hey, I got you a cheap ticket to the Philippines. Go ahead, go see your family. Next thing you know, he wires the family $126,000 to buy a house, and she figured we're breaking up.
I mean, to us, that's an unusual scenario, but to some cultures, it's understandable. And the time element fits. So, in other words, when she said he sent her, he did. And he distanced her from the actual preparation in Las Vegas, whether he didn't want her involved or whether he was afraid that she'd spill the beans. This was part of his maniacal planning.
Do you think, I mean, this guy clearly is crazy, has a screw loose, many screw looses. She was dating him for a long time. Don't you think she saw or knew something was strange about his personality? You had people at the casino. One guy said he's a starer. He loves to stare at people.
Right.
One guy said he really gives me the creeps. Another guy at one of the tables said he looked at him one night and said, I want to go kill my mother. Why the hell did she bring me into this world? And everyone at the table thought that was strange.
You know, that is very telling. And listen, I'm not a psychiatrist. This may very well have been suicide by cop. It's a horrific way to do that because it involved 58 other innocent people in deaths. I'm smiling at your intuition because to you, a spouse or a companion or a girlfriend would have noticed something.
You see them at their worst.
Right, exactly.
You know who they really are.
Exactly. We won't go through our personal experiences in that. She may just be of such a culture, a subservient person, that she didn't think it was her role to do that, and the FBI understands it.
A gun shop owner said in 2011 they walked in together and they shopped and didn't buy anything. So to say these guns were new or didn't know anything about it, right there's a little problem with that story. They also have a problem with the brother's story. We'll see where this goes.
Yes, we will see where it goes. And remember, person of interest is a media phrase. It's not a legal phrase. It's sometimes a dog whistle to the person out there. Come on in. We got to talk to you.
All right, Judge, thanks so much.
Oh, you're
Appreciate
welcome,
it.
guys.
Thanks, Judge.
Congratulations on the new book.
All right, thanks. Couple more weeks, but Ainsley's is first, right?
Oh, congratulations
Thank
on
you so
yours.
much,
All right,
Judge.
it's all based on your life, Judge.
I'm sure the two of you will have one soon, too.
All right.